Today we are going to be building an outdoor storage cabinet. We are going to try and build this out of as much of our own lumber as possible. So behind me here you can see a stack of lumber that we actually milled back in late 2021, so a little over a year ago, coming up to a year and a half. That lumber's been sitting there and air drying, and I've been using that lumber over the last couple of weeks to build some shelves inside the shipping container, and that really gives us our first challenge. I have been playing forest Jenga with this pile, and I don't know if you can tell on the video there, I have just been pulling these boards out from the side of the pile, and so right now all the way in there is actually empty. And here you go, you can see end on, you can kind of see the problem we've got. We're finally going to have to take the top off this pile. I've really been trying to avoid doing that, mainly because it was covered with snow until a few days ago. But now that it's uncovered, we're going to get that pile off, get some of this lumber out, and then start getting that ready to build with. Got it. Yeah. All right, we've got the roof pieces off the top. A lot of these were just kind of like janky boards that were really, they're just adding weight to the pile, giving a bit of moisture protection from above. We've now reached the core of the material we're after. You can really see that Jenga situation we had going on there with just the middle boards. I need about 15 or so good boards out of here to make this project. So I'm going to start lifting these out, and then we'll get them ready for planing. Diana's gone back up to the RV and she's working on boiling down some maple sap today. So it's just going to be me down here working the planer. Well, I've cleared up the shipping container a little bit at the front to give me some space to start work here. We are going to be using the Dewalt DW735 planer. It is a thickness planer, and unlike a lot of our tools, it does not run on batteries. It is a corded power tool. Because it has a high draw and it runs for a long time, that makes sense. But we don't have power down here at the shipping container, so we are going to be using our Wen generators. So this is the Wen generator we've been using here on the property to power the RV until we got power late last year. Each one of these is rated at 1900 watts. It will surge a little bit higher, but that's kind of the power output you can expect. What we found is that the Dewalt DW735 planer will run on one of these generators until you ask a little bit too much of the planer. So if it kind of starts to bog down because it's a wider board you're putting through and it's trying to take up a little bit more material, or maybe it hits a couple of knots in there, that kind of thing, it will bog down. When it does, it will overload the generator, which will then cut out as a safety measure, and the planer then obviously stops because it has no power, which now means you've got a board halfway through the planer that you then have to take out, put back through at a shallower depth of cut. And it just takes time, and it's a pain, and it's annoying. So what we found is actually running two of them. So running the two similar generators with the parallel kit that we have. We're not running it off a 30 amp or anything like that, just a 20 amp outlet. But once you link the two together with that cable at the back, it hooks in from one to here. And it basically makes sure that you have the full 20 amps available on any of those outlets. So then we'll just plug the planer into one of those. And we found that by doing that, that solves all the issues that we had with the planer cutting out. So that's the plan. I'm working alone here. I'm gonna get these generators running. Because I am working alone, I find that the easiest thing to do is small batches. These are full 2" by 4" boards. We want to take them down to the same that you'd find in the store, 1.5" by 3.5", which is quite a lot of material to take off. I'm going to take off the 2" down to 1.5" on the planer. I'm then going to try and use the table saw to do the other dimension. This wood is nice and dry, so we shouldn't have any issues there. But I'm hoping that by doing that, it will keep the board fairly square. We don't own a jointer, and so I'm hoping to use the table saw to kind of get that nice flat edge, and it should also be a lot quicker than the planer. I'll do that in 2 passes, and we'll look at that later. But for now, let's get these generators fired up, get our first few boards in. Once everything's warmed up, we'll get to planing. So planing these boards is not fast going, but let me try and explain what we're doing and why. Here on the planer, I've got 3 boards. This is a rough cut, a rough sawn board, which is what we're starting with. This is the first one I just planed down to the right thickness. And this, just for comparison, is a store-bought 2x4. It's a pressure-treated one, but for the purpose of this demonstration, it works just fine. If I show you end on, you can see just how much thickness I'm taking off and why. I'm trying to get it to the same thickness as a store-bought 2x4. A store-bought 2x4, if you're not aware, even though it's called a 2x4, it is not 2 inches by 4 inches. It's actually 1.5 inches by 3.5 inches. When we milled these, we milled them to 2 inches by 4 inches, which means I've got to take off a 1/2 inch of thickness and also a 1/2 inch of width as well. The thickness I'm taking off with the planer, and I'm doing it in 1/16 inch passes. I may try and get a 1/8 inch pass, see how it does on those, but I could hear it starting to bog down even on the 1/16 when it hit a knot, and I'm concerned that it might falter at an 1/8 inch cut, which is obviously removing more material and thus harder. So I'm doing 1/16 cuts for now. Why did we start with such a thick board? Well, these were some of the first boards we ever milled on our sawmill, and honestly, we just didn't know what to mill to. We decided to mill to 2 inch because it's a lot easier to remove material than it is to add. But as I'm discovering today, it's not that easy to remove material. It does take time, and it generates a ton of pine shavings. See if we can see how many are in there already. So this bag is kind of about there already, just from one 2x4. Based on what I found over the last couple of weeks milling these, and I wasn't milling them to quite the same dimensions, I was doing less planing. But based on that, I expect we're going to generate 2 to 3 gallons of pine shavings per 2x4 that we plane down, which is a ton of shavings. I suspect we're going to fill this 70-gallon container just from this batch of 15 or so 2x4s. But that's what we're trying to achieve, and that's why. So we're trying to get it down to thickness. We're trying to get it down to exactly match a store-bought one. That means that the lumber we're doing or using is exactly the same as you would buy in a store, although hopefully straighter and better quality, and also free, because we milled it ourselves. It's all our own pine from trees that we felled, we milled, we dried, and now we're preparing to use. So I'm going to be here for the next couple of hours, probably going through more of this, and hopefully by the end, we'll have a bunch of boards exactly 1.5 inches thick, but lesson learned, in future, we will mill to slightly thinner than 2 inches. We just don't need that much material on the board to remove later, which will also give us a better yield from the logs, so that's a bonus as well. Well, you get the benefits of a time lapse. I have to stand here and put all this through the planer. When I say that the planer generates a lot of pine shavings, I am not exaggerating. I have done 3 boards now. I was able to get up to about 3/32 cut. I did do a few passes at 1/8 of an inch depth of cut, and it did it. It was bogging the machine down a little more than I liked, and I was just nervous that if it hit a good sized knot, it was going to stall. So I've been doing mainly 3/32 passes, and that's a lot faster. That bag, I've done 3 2x4s through here now. That bag of pine shavings is full. So my job now is to empty it into our big container. Our big container can hold about 5 or 6 of those bags, and it's a 72-gallon container, I think. So my best guess is we've got probably somewhere around 12 to 15 gallons of pine shavings just from those 3 2x4s. And I'm only planing the faces here. So if that bag is 12 to 15 gallons, 3 2x4s, that means that each one is using like 4 or 5, or producing 4 or 5 gallons of pine shavings, or put another way, about 2/3 of a cubic foot or something of pine shavings for every single board. Yeah, we've got a lot of pine shavings coming up this year. That bag is full to about there now, so there's still plenty of capacity in there. We really like these bags because we can take them to other people, leave the bag with them, and they can use that to take pine shavings out of. When it's empty, we'll pick it up, refill it for them. If you like these, we'll leave a link in the description below where you can check them out. All right, we are done with the planing. Let me try and walk you through what we've got here. So we just did 15 boards, and here they are. This is the 15 we've created. These are now all planed to exactly 1.5 inches thick, but we still need to do the width. That's still at 4 inches. I'm going to do that on the table saw. These boards are relatively straight. This one here I think is the worst one from the pile that I got. Otherwise they're pretty darn straight. So pretty happy with that. Overall, that wasn't too bad. It took, I don't know, an hour or two to do the whole lot. It's a good amount of time. And would it have been quicker to run to the store and pick up some 2x4s? Yes, it would, frankly. But right now, 2x4s are maybe $3.50, something like that, near us at the big box stores. They're not going to be as straight and true as the ones we've just planed there. If you go to a lumber yard, they'll be better, but they may be more expensive. I know around us right now, they're actually quite a bit more expensive. So yeah, we could have done, but when we actually milled this lumber, 2x4s, even at the big box stores, were 3 times that price. And so those 15 boards there would have been something like $150. And that's what we've been able to produce just here. Obviously, there's still the table saw to go to rip them to width, and there's not included in there is the time spent milling them and stacking them and everything else. So yeah, I don't know that you're going to find us doing a commercial operation milling 2x4s, but that's never been the point. The point of this exercise really has been a bit of a practice run. We are going to be milling a ton of hardwoods, some maple, some cherry, some birch, some of these really nice woods. And this is my first time using a planer. I've got a few hundred board feet of experience now on that planer that I didn't have before. And I've done it on effectively some cheap pine we're just going to be using for framing some shop projects. When the time comes to mill some nice ash for a floor, or maple to make some furniture, or some cherry, or whatever it may be, I've now got a little bit more experience. I feel now a little bit more confident using some of these tools. And for us, that's a big part of what it's about. Another reason we did this, you may be thinking, why on earth didn't you just use rough-sawn lumber for this project? It's just a shop project, an outdoor little shed thing. Surely you could have used rough-sawn lumber for that. And you would be 100% correct. Of course we could. It's not something, it's dry lumber. It's not green anymore. So it would have been even easier to use. We absolutely could have done this with rough-sawn 2x4s. So why didn't we? Well, a couple of reasons. One, as I just talked about, we wanted the practice. I wanted to go through the motions, get the experience of doing this so that when we do need to do it, we've got that experience. Second, we want to try and save weight and space on this build. We are kind of constrained on space. We're trying to build it into a footprint that will actually fit in the truck bed. So if we do want to move it around, or even use it as kind of a mobile toolbox at times, we will have that ability. And so if those boards are wider than they have to be, that's just eating into that internal space and that height and things. And it's not a huge deal, but it does make a difference. The other part of that is weight. We want to be able to move this thing around. We need to make sure we can lift it with a tractor. we've just taken off a pretty good chunk of the weight by planing these boards down, and that will really help to keep this thing as mobile as possible. It is going to be pretty heavy duty. We are going to side it with board and batten, another technique we want to practice. So that's another big reason we've done it. The third reason is we are going to make these plans, the SketchUp designs available, so if you want to also build this project, you can. And we're conscious that most people don't have access to full-size 2x4. Getting the standard stuff you pick up in the big box store, the 1.5 by 3.5 inch lumber, is just more readily available for most people. And so we're hoping that by having the plans fit that, we're going to build it that way. You can see exactly what you could also build if you wanted to follow our plans. Just an offer out there if it's useful to you. In addition to the 2x4s that we've just planed, we have got a ton of these pine shavings. I absolutely filled that 70-ish gallon container there. That therefore is about just shy of 10 cubic feet, or about a third of a cubic yard. So there's a lot of shavings there. They're not heavy. That's the nice thing about this. I can fairly easily lift this bag. It's not too heavy at all. So we will be taking that round to a neighbour later today, and hopefully picking up some nice fresh eggs in return. They can use that for some mulch in their yard and bedding for chickens and all sorts of things. Otherwise, let me try and answer some of the questions you might have. Let's start with the planer. We have been using the DW735 planer from Dewalt. As you can see, there are some shavings on the floor around there. Honestly, the majority of those were produced from when I got the bag too full. The way that the extractor blows, so there's actually a fan in there blowing the chips out and into this bag. So it will inflate that bag. If air can't escape from that bag, it will just not work very well. It won't be able to blow into the bag. I have tried in the past putting like a trash bag on there, a plastic trash bag, and it just doesn't work because it can't blow the air through the bag. It's not air permeable at all. So most of those chips came from that. But honestly, I don't think that's too bad anyway. That amount of chips from 15 boards that produced that amount of pine shavings in the actual dust collector. So I've been really happy with that. This is a fairly new planer. Like I say, it's only got a few hundred board feet of pine that's been through it so far, so the knives are nice and sharp. It worked really well, and really happy with the performance of that. An obvious question might be, wouldn't it be faster if you did X? Or if you had Y? Of course, if we had a more powerful planer, it would be quicker. If we had a larger chip collection bag, it would be quicker. I'm sure there's things I could do that would make this faster, but it's just me here on my own. I don't have an outfeed table or roller or anything, which would definitely make my life easier and is on the list now to either buy or build, because I really do want that for use with a table saw as well, not just with the planer here. There probably are some things I could do to make my life easier. When I started a couple of weeks ago on a similar project to this, planing a load of 2x4s, I would actually stack them up, put every board through at one thickness and put them into another pile, then adjust the depth of cut and do another pass and keep going back and forth between the two piles. It made sense at first, but I just found it was a lot of material handling. And in the end, I found it easier just to do one board at a time. Every turn of the roller, so every time you turn this handle, a full revolution like that, it moves it 1/16 of an inch up or down. So it's actually really easy to keep track of the depth that or the thickness that you're cutting. And so for the first several turns through there, I don't even have to look at the gauge on the far side. I know I'm still well above my desired thickness. And eventually I can then make sure as I get closer, make sure I'm honing in on exactly 1.5 inches. But I found just doing one board at a time keeps things simple for me. What about if I fed multiple boards through the planer at the same time? You can, certainly on the first pass, I have tried that and it's hard because all our boards aren't quite the same thickness, and it's a single, well, it's two rollers in there, but the single roller across, wow, nice big wind there. And so if one of those boards is slightly thicker than the other one, it just won't pull that second board through. And then the boards come out staggered, and when I'm here on my own with no outfeed roller, that is difficult to handle. I also feel it would bog down the planer quite a lot more. Obviously, the wider the board or multiple boards that you're cutting, the harder the planer has to work at a given thickness. So I'm not actually convinced that would make it much quicker for me anyway. On a similar vein, what about snipe? So snipe is when the board sort of tips as it's going in or coming out, and that can cause a little divot at the end or some tear out and things like that. Yes, if this were some nice hardwood that I'd already cut to length, I would be really concerned about that. This is essentially framing lumber, and the ends are, well, frankly, what I cut with a chainsaw when I originally felled the tree and bucked the logs. So the ends are going to get squared off and cleaned up anyway. If there is any snipe, I can deal with it then if I need to. But realistically, for this purpose, it's just not a big deal. So for me now, I'm going to clean up these pine shavings on the floor. I will just sweep up what I can with a brush, add them to the pile there, and anything else, I'll get the leaf blower, and it'll just clear all of these outside in no time. Well, I hope you enjoyed following along as I planed those boards down. Next step, like I say, get them on the table saw, get them ripped to width, and then we can start building our outdoor storage cabinet. If you did enjoy this video, then hit that like button and comment below if you got questions about why we're doing this and technique and all those sorts of things about planing our home milled lumber. And if you haven't already done so, then make sure to hit that subscribe button, and we'll see you in the next video.